Hello, it's Maria Athanasopoulos, the Active Ageing Officer at Canterbury Bankstown Council. I acknowledge that this podcast is being recorded on Darug country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, and I pay my respect to their elders past and present and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. My parents migrated to Australia because they wanted a better life for themselves and the family they were planning to have. I thank the traditional custodians for protecting the land and the waters. I also would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Darug and Eora Nations peoples whose land I work on and live on. I am committed to honouring their cultural heritage and the contribution they make to this city.
Hi, I'm James, local resident of Canterbury Bankstown.
And I'm Anna, Community Development Worker in Canterbury Bankstown.
Canterbury Bankstown is rich in diversity, from the languages spoken, countries of birth, journeys to CBCity, along with the various identities, abilities, faiths practiced, achievements, and multi-generations.
Together, we'll be interviewing a range of community members from Canterbury Bankstown. We'll be amplifying diverse voices from across the CBCity to give you an insight into other cultures. Together, we're working to create a great CBCity where we all belong, feel welcome, safe, and embrace our differences. This is Voices of CBCity.
This episode is part B of our interview with Imam Ahmed Abdo and Reverend Trevor Jennings, talking about the similarities, differences and beauties of the Islamic and Christian faiths, two of the many religions practiced across CBCity. If you haven't listened to part A yet, we recommend you go back and check it out first before tuning into this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Voices of CBCity on your favourite podcast platform so you don't miss our other interviews with local CBCity community members and hear their stories.
One thing I'm interested in hearing about from each of you is I'm imagining that you were both born into the religion that you're practicing today. Your families practiced that religion. Am I right?
Yep. Yes. Well, for us, actually, we have a tradition. Prophet Muhammad says every child is born in a pure and natural state. Mm-hmm. So we actually believe every child is born in submission to God. And we don't make distinction between different religions at that particular time. So I actually believe everyone is a believer in God before the age of puberty. And that if any child does die, even if we see a child who comes from a Christian family or a Jewish family or a Buddhist family, but is under the age of puberty, we believe that they are believers in God. And that they will enter paradise.
And then do they lose it?
No, it remains, that's it. They've left this life.
But no, but after puberty?
That's another story. So they've got to then go out and seek and research in terms of belief. So that's a responsibility that we believe is upon the child that has reached the age of puberty, and to find out the meaning of life and the purpose of life.
Yeah, well, years ago there's terrible stories in Ireland about children who weren't baptized, and they baptized a child as quickly in case they were going to hell or whatever like this, or if it was an illegitimate child, they'd be born outside, couldn't be baptized with or buried within in the churchyard. There's all these just terrible stories, and now it's changed an awful lot. It's sort of like to exclude people rather than to include people. Really harsh, horrible theology, but to me it was all about controlling people, like the way they lived. But sorry, Anna, your question.
I guess I'm interested in what made each of you pursue a life in religion, to take it further than what your family members or your religious community, what made you become or want to become more leaders in your faiths?
Well, I often think if I was grew up in Saudi Arabia, I'd probably be Muslim, and how would I be different? It's like I just go, it's because in different places. My own personal thing is that I had a terrible fear of death growing up, so that kept me searching. I was very suspicious of church hierarchy, and it didn't. And then when I had my own kind of personal experience or decision to follow Jesus as a follower, I think it was like more this humility and this other side that I began to see. And so I've always had this kind of argument or fight with church structures and hierarchy and everything, because I always feel like the path I'm to follow is a bit different. So for me, like, it seems a bit funny, but I feel like I'm in somehow to change the way it is. But honestly, it's so hard to change something, because I think, I don't know whether it's human nature or whatever, it keeps coming back to this. So all these lovely things we're talking about, it's still a mystery to me. How come, if this is so beautiful, why don't people live this way? Like, I don't know if I mentioned child sexual abuse, but within the not the United, but the Christian churches, I just can't understand how this secrecy and all this stuff happens. And so for me, there was something, I guess, about changing that. But also, I think for me, I felt at the time people are kind of lost or feeling disconnected. And I had had this experience of God as love. And then I wanted to share that, and that's all about like connecting with people and this sort of connectedness. And then as I've gone on, I realized it's not just connectedness with people or those like me, it's like connectedness with everybody, and it's connectedness with all things, and like the environment, the earth, every single thing, that we're all connected in this kind of way. So for me, where I started is sort of gone much deeper, and sometimes I think, oh my goodness, I can't get my head around it. It's so amazing and mysterious. And yet then we live at this other level of, doing church stuff that we have to do, and a whole lot of stuff that's, it's a job where you get on, you have to do it. But what really excites me is like the theology and that whole understanding that is so beautiful, and it can change the world if people will live it and follow it. But so there was, for me, there was that. Sometimes I find it really hard to believe I'm a minister. Just don't think should be there, but then other people say, yeah, you should, because it's that kind of stuff. So I've been, I think, like for 40 years now, which is a long time.
Well, I guess for me, that's actually quite interesting, hearing you speak on that, Trevor, and just that life journey. But for me, I think it's two things. It's a need of the mind and a need of the soul that I identified early on in life. I used to observe both my mother and father practicing. My late grandfather, may the mercy of God be upon him, he was a very, very seriously observant and devout Muslim who was very committed to his prayers, very committed to his family, and a person of immense wisdom, that I would find community members would always be seeking him for advice and for counsel. So I remember that at a very young age. As I was going through school, in fact, in high school, I remember my commerce teacher. I used to actually have kind arguments, kind debates. We used to have debates sometimes during the lesson as well, just about the existence of God. And so that caused me to go out and to research. By the time I got to university, where you're exposed to everything under the sun, you've got to be pretty confident in what you believe. So I started to go into rational proofs and theories to establish existence of a creator, and to be able to argue that and converse in a way that would be convincing to people. That then took me on a journey where I felt that the mind had been sufficed and nourished, but there was something missing, and that was my heart, that was my soul. So it's not just about data and information and conviction, but it's about a feeling. So I needed that feeling. So I was searching far and wide, and I found two places in the world, in the Muslim world, that I was inclined towards to further my Islamic studies. And it was Syria and Yemen. And they were both considered as being authoritative places for people who wanted to study Islamic theology. So my heart was drawn to Yemen, and I spent a good for the better part of 10 years in Yemen, in the beautiful valley of Hadramaut in the southern part of Yemen, where I began to discover a tradition of Islam which I hadn't been exposed to before. That was one that was deeply spiritual. We'd be living in mud brick houses. The walls were about 1/2 meter thick, like this. I remember there'd be scorpions at times that would appear, geckos in the middle of the night, and you'd go and get your shoe and try and throw it at it. And the moment you walk out of the front door, there'd be dust in your face, so fine that you wouldn't be able to detect it. There'd be goats and chickens roaming the streets, and in fact, my daughter thought it was a horse, and she'd be going out and riding on the goat. But I think you just can't do that now. Some places you wouldn't let your children out loose on the street. I remember when we were growing up, we'd be riding our bikes on the street and everything nice and safe. But nowadays you need to think twice. But just that sense of village, sense of community. I remember there in the city of Tarim in Yemen, when someone would be ill or sick, or a lady would give birth, that for the next month the community would come together and they would prepare home-cooked food and they would deliver it to the front door. I remember we were in that situation. I ended up having a fridge full of different meals and dishes. So that idea of being there for one another was something that resonated deeply with me. And I found that it was a very, very deep spiritual connection, one which would go, and I think this sort of touches on what you were saying before, Trevor. What is it that's caused us to be so distant? My reflection is we focused more on the outward form, on the apparent, and we've forgotten the inner spiritual hidden meanings. And I think that's where the power is. We just dig a little deeper and we'll find so much that we can actually explore that's going to give us that nourishment. Prophet Muhammad, for me, one of his statements is so inspiring that continues to inspire me. He says, true wealth is not the wealth of the hand, material wealth. It's the wealth of the soul. And I think in that's what kept me going in order to tread this path of Islamic learning.
I was good. Like, there's so many common things coming up, like community and connectedness. Like, for me, it was a search to be connected because I felt very isolated, and I wanted to feel like I was connecting to people. And then I'm thinking now, everything's about individualism, but in our religion, it's about connectedness to each other and our respect for others, but also our responsibility to others, and that we're more as a community, or we help each other in communities rather than just looking after ourselves. So there was that kind of search, and that's why I think I'm loving doing this intercultural work, or why it's important for me being a minister, part of a community, because it's pretty amazing, really. Like, my wife laughs at me. She says I have the best job in the world, that I can be drinking. Like, I was drinking coffee all day yesterday with people and drinks and whatever, and that was my day. But it's like all about connecting with people at a deep level, that you're actually having conversations about their mental health, life, everything. Whereas everywhere else, people want you, there's a transaction going on about money or something, and we're not really interested in any transaction. We're just helping each other to live life, and then trying to do it in a community. And it's sort of what attracts me about it as being in a community. And it's a bit of a what's the word? It's not rebellion, but it's like. I'm trying to think of the word, but we're like a protest. It's like we're protesting against what's happening, this dividing, that community, and it's very important. And I think that religion can really help that. So it can be very inclusive, but it can also, I think it's people, individuals use it to divide. It's not religion. What was one of the questions I think we were going to talk about? Like, religion, I don't think divides. I think people divide, or choose to use it to divide.
Yeah. And what would you say are some of the core tenets of ethical conduct in your respective religions, and how are these values applied in daily life?
Yeah, for us, in terms of Islamic law, what we call Sharia, there's a preservation of the self, a preservation of belief, a preservation and a protection of honor, preservation, protection of property, and a preservation and protection of the mind. So these are 5 core principles which are sought to be preserved. And there's a very, very strong sense that when we reflect upon one Quranic verse, he who saves one soul has saved all of humanity. Because from that one soul that you actually save, you've saved an entire generation that is going to come from that soul, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A protection of that mind. And so Muslims are very, very strict, at least those who are practicing, that not only do we not drink, but we probably don't end up in places where drinking is going to happen. Of course, and there's an exception with Trevor's friend that was there in the pub and speaking about theological matters.
He didn't drink.
Okay, but he didn't drink.
He was the most beautiful man I have ever met. He was just incredible.
But generally, you won't find practicing Muslims near those who are who are drinking or places where alcohol is served. But the reason being is that not only do we stay away from that which is prohibited, but there's also this understanding that anything that may lead to that which is prohibited, then we're also required to stay away from. So protecting that intellect from being clouded, from being intoxicated, because the cause of many accidents on the road, unfortunately, is drink driving. And I think if you got Muslims as poster boys and girls to prevent people from drinking and driving, it's funny when a police officer pulls up my car, I'm driving, and it gives me a random breath test. You're not going to get anything there.
One day I was on my way to church and the police stopped me, and it was like really early in the morning, and I said, it's after church you should be breathalyzing me, because in the old days the priests used to go, especially the Anglicans, they'd go from one church to the other, and they had to drink. It would be port, so it was much stronger, and because of the ritual, say this is the blood of Christ, they'd have to drink whatever was left over. So by the time they'd done a few services, they had drunk a lot of alcohol. So I don't think the police officer really got my joke.
So, another one of those principles is the preservation and protection of lineage. So we've got a very, very strong family unit and a focus on that. The sanctity of marriage, the importance of rearing children in a really devout and pious manner, ensuring that we don't go out and take people's property, without due right and permission. So in fact, in our jurisprudential texts, we've got entire chapters on the laws of trade and commerce. Some people think that Sharia is very, very limited. Some people only think, if someone steals, you cut off the hand. We don't Sharia. Hang on. Sharia is very, very large. There are texts that we will study, encyclopedias. There's law on personal worship. There's law on marriage and divorce. There's laws on inheritance. Like, Muslims don't decide where the inheritance goes. In fact, there's an entire chapter in the Quran in which many of the verses God has already prescribed the way that the estate is going to be divided up. Yes, a Muslim will then have recourse to distribute a third of the estate, but the 2/3 of the estate is already defined by God in the Quran. So laws of inheritance, laws of justice and criminal law and punishment, laws of states and how political states will deal with one another. When there were slaves around, encouragement for the freeing of slaves. So Islam actually came and found in Arabia there was actually no laws and no human rights with regard to slaves and they're being bought and sold. So it came and actually started to encourage people to free slaves. It actually says to the master of the slaves, you clothe the slave with what you clothe yourself with, and you feed the slave with what you feed yourself and your family with. So this actually began to lift the status of slaves within Arab society that had absolutely no laws to deal with, with slavery. So these are concepts of justice and fairness, equality that are very pivotal within Islam.
Can I just pick up on one point? You were talking about self-preservation, and earlier you talked about, is it self-annihilation? Can you just give me some clarity?
Sure. So, preservation of the self means the sanctity and the honor of human life. Then, in fact, a Muslim is not even permitted to take their life. Suicide is big now. There's no week that passes except that I see someone or I hear from someone that's got suicidal thoughts. that may have attempted to take his life. That's happened on multiple occasions. But understanding the importance and the honor that we believe that this human life that we have is not ours. In fact, our whole body is on loan to us, and we can't deal with it in the way that we want. We've got to make sure that we abide by what God wants us to do with our body. So it's not like, well, I decide that it's too much and I can't take what is being dished out at me. I'm so depressed and I'm so anxious, and this life and this world is too much. My job and my family and my work and my this and my debts and everything, I can't take it, so I'm going to take my life. No. So we need to open up and unpack that discussion. This sanctity of human life, it's actually not yours for you to decide. When God decides and has decreed your time is up, then your time is up, but you don't take that into your own hands. And likewise, you don't go and you cause the demise of another human being, because even though they may differ in belief with you, God created them. He put them on this earth. So you're not the one that comes and decides when to take them away.
And the self-annihilation, is that
So
more about ego?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's that internal purification. That's when I come into a gathering. One of my teachers says to me, he says, this is before I left my training in Yemen, he says, Ahmed, if you come into a gathering, as a scholar, as an Imam, he says, you come into a gathering and you've got all the notables, the VIPs sitting at the front, and you just sit at the back, and no one tells you, come to the front, this is your place. No one tells you. He says, you shouldn't feel any different. He says, because this is part of humility. It's not about where you sit amongst people, but where are you in the sight of God? So that's what we're talking about, self-annihilation. A lot of the time it's like, how do people see me? How do people view me? They don't respect me. They don't honor me. Funny story, I was emceeing an event once, and one of the organizers gave me a piece of paper to note, because I was announcing prizes and people have donated prizes on that particular day. And notables, he says, such and such person, you didn't mention their name. He's actually upset. You got to mention the name. So he didn't get it yet. He hasn't gotten that lesson of what it means to actually be humble in a gathering.
Right. That's a good thing. Like, starting with humility, I'm thinking, I was just thinking about Christianity has this sort of history of having like the monastics again, and the nuns in their orders and the monks and so on, and there was an awful lot of that, time spent for that kind of what did you call it?
Self-annihilation.
Yeah, that kind of thing, and it can become very terrible. People whipping themselves and denying themselves. It's just. But for the ordinary, like lay people or ordinary people, it can't be really that. But it's much more about, like you're saying, humility. Is and that if your name isn't read out or whatever, and they haven't. You really haven't got it. You haven't really got what Christianity is about or what it is. It's because if you need that kind of ego thing or whatever, this is what I was talking about, like the church, the hierarchy. It was all about climbing up, and I'm thinking, Jesus was all about going down, down, down. It's like he takes the lowest place. Like he always says, if you want to follow me, take up your cross, which is a symbol of death, that you're willing to die and be treated like the worst criminal or whatever. And it's not about going up, up, up. So like in that situation, someone just hasn't really got it. Are we talking about core beliefs or?
Talking about ethics and applying values in daily life, things like grassroots initiatives, looking at food distribution, community support, family domestic violence, even in those.
Well, I think they all just flow from that stuff of Jesus, to love, love one another, and to love others as you love yourself. And it's like really thinking about that, and like in regards to violence against women especially, it's like if you're a man, that if you love yourself, you will treat this person with that respect. But like sadly, I think in Christianity and patriarchy within it, that there's been this history, and it's kind of rearing its head again. It's this sort of sense that the man is the important one rather than rather than the sharing. So you've had within the beauty of Christianity this kind of distortion, where women have been treated really terrible, and in some denominations really. And you can trace violence against women to some of the teaching and what's held, which is really seems to be total contradiction to all that we've been talking about. That the other person, you're going to always hold them up like that, so you're not going to treat them in that way. But it's a bit like we swap from that beauty into taking the control and seeing women and children as possessions, which like was all part of the law not that long ago. And thank goodness laws have changed. But it's a shame that laws have to change in the country to make religion sometimes then has to follow the law. But I think the religion should actually be leading what it actually is following.
Yeah. That reminds me, Trevor, a couple of things. One is on family and domestic violence. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never lifted a hand before any woman in his life, and that's noted. The second thing is, he said to the men, the best of you are those who are best to their dependents, and I am the best amongst you to my dependents, meaning your family, your women and your children. There was a man that came from outside of the city of Medina, so more like Bedouin, and very rough. He sees the Prophet Muhammad embracing and kissing his grandchildren, Hassan and Hussein. They were the most beloved of people to him. And the man says, I've got 10 kids, and I haven't kissed one of them. I mean, I haven't shown any affection to any of them. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, what do you want me to do with someone whom God has stripped mercy from his heart? So this idea of compassion, again, love and mercy to one's family. But what you were speaking as well about in terms of social justice. So within Islam, there's a very, very strong awareness as well that if we do see something that we believe is morally wrong, we've actually got a duty to speak up against it. In fact, this is part of our what we call jihad. So jihad actually means struggle, striving. That's the linguistic meaning. It has other manifestations as well. And part of that is a manifestation on the battlefield. That's a type of jihad. That's a type of struggle. But in one saying, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, the best of jihad is to say a word of truth in the face of a tyrannical ruler. So when you're witnessing oppression and injustice, the masses are actually responsible. They have a duty before God to speak out against that injustice, against that oppression, because it's part of this ummah concept, this community concept. Like in Islam, we're considered one community worldwide. So it's not like, because it's not happening in my little suburb, I don't worry about it. No. Whether it's happening in Sudan, or it's happening in China, or it's happening in Indonesia, or it's happening in Africa, or in what we're seeing now, it's unfolding in Palestine, in Gaza, then this, I believe, because my father's actually Palestinian. So that's something that I'm actually very, very strongly connected to. He was a survivor of the Nakba in 1948. So we're reliving that cycle of violence. And when we do see that, an unfolding genocide, then we actually speak out against that. Because we want peace. We want people to live in harmony. But as long as we've got these ulterior motives, land grabs, we're hearing about land grabs now. We're hearing about imperial countries coming in to take over entire Gaza Strip and to redevelop it. I mean, who gave you authority? So that's, as a religious leader, as a Muslim, that's actually my responsibility to speak out. It's not just I get my prayer beads and I sit in the corner of my mosque and I, pray to God silently. No, as a Muslim, I've actually got a civil responsibility to bring that balance to the wider society.
Often some Christians say that we should, keep out of politics. They say when you're speaking up, you're becoming political. But it's not. It's about speaking up for people who don't have a voice or are powerless, or it's because it's unfair on them. It's like, it might have nothing to do with you, but if it's over there, you still speak up on behalf of people that you have nothing to do with. It's I think you're bringing out something that's really part of our religion, but we're so silenced by politics and a whole lot of things. Like the Uniting Church is always speaking up on different things, which is really why I suppose I'm still like part of it. But I think that's a great thing. And sometimes you have to speak up because nobody else is speaking up. And I think in a way, Jesus is someone who's speaking up on behalf of all the downtrodden and everything. That's what his thing was a protest. And as followers, we're to speak up. And like sometimes speaking up isn't using words. It might be just going to the other side, as I said earlier, or standing with people, or in quietness, and making friends with neighbors, or there's a whole lot of different things. But everyone says, no, stay over here, don't ruffle the thing. But that can be a very powerful thing of changing sides, or trying to see something from the other point of view. But it's all about speaking up for sense and for people.
That reminds me of a guiding principle that the Prophet Muhammad reminds us, peace be upon him. He says, any one of you who sees an evil should change it with their hand. And if they are unable to do so, then with their tongue. If they're unable to do so, then with their heart. And that's the weakest of faith. So depending on everyone's position and status within society, we've all got a responsibility. Yeah. Some people can physically change the wrong and other people can't. Some people have got knowledge, so they can speak out against the wrong and teach people and educate people. And some people don't have that knowledge or ability, but they can at least believe what I'm witnessing is wrong. It's not fair. And that's the minimum that we all... Because if we don't have that, the reality is we're not alive, we're dead.
What I gather from what you guys are discussing is that I wouldn't narrow it to Islam or Christianity, but religion as a whole, as a very real system of beliefs. Would you agree with it? With that, it's always about being in service for others. So you mentioned that it's not just about what's in the narrow community; it's about serving others that are across the world. And I'm sure Christianity is very much aligned with that sense of value. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, clearly, because as I said before, we've got this sense of ummah, and actually ummah means community, but the Arabic word for mother is So it actually comes from the Arabic word for mother, which is actually quite profound. Another statement, the Prophet Muhammad says, paradise lies at the feet of mothers. So it's like the mother is that figure of the origin of community. And we find that it's the mother that in her womb actually holds the child for 9 months. And no one is going to have love and compassion for a child like a mother is. So we need to see the entire world as being our child. And if we do that, then we're connected with everyone wherever they are. So in fact, the Prophet Muhammad says, any person who assists with an evil, even if it be with half a word, then they will be partaking in that evil. And so that reminds us of our responsibility, that even the words that we utter can have impact upon people that are on the other side of the world. So we need to watch what it is that we say and watch what it is that we do. Even with our charity distribution, there's no limitation as to where that can be distributed. So if there's no poor people in your immediate locality, then you go out and you send to different places around the world. And that's what we've got. We've got a lot of these NGOs that are going around and taking some of that charity money from Muslims who are paying that 1/40th every year and distributing it to people in need wherever they might be. That connectedness. When Muslims pray, they pray in community, they pray in congregation. So we call it Jama'ah prayer. They do that as often as they can, if they can do it 5 times a day. When Muslims begin the month of Ramadan, it begins the same time all around the world. When Muslims perform Hajj, which is the ultimate act of worship, which is the 5th pillar in Islam, I didn't get to speak much about that, but that's like the United Nations for Muslims. You get up to 3 million people at the one place, the one time, all performing this sacred act of pilgrimage. And it doesn't matter what color skin you are, black, white, pink, brown. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic background you come from. It doesn't matter how much wealth that you have, because at the end of the day, when you go for pilgrimage, men are only going to be wearing 2 white garments. And that's why you see them wearing those 2 white garments. And when they're performing that pilgrimage for a number of days every single year, it's a reminder that when we go into our graves, Muslims are actually going to be shrouded. We shroud our deceased in white cloth. So it's a reminder. You're going for pilgrimage. It's a reminder that you're going to be buried one day. And it doesn't matter what brand name. There's no such thing as designer label clothing when you go for pilgrimage. You're wearing the same towels, the same cloth. So it's the ultimate equalizer for a global community praying together.
Wow, it's incredible.
You better start with the question again, because I'm just sometimes I get so lost in the ideas. My head just goes off. And
You paint a very beautiful picture, that's for sure.
yes.
What would you say are some of the most important aspects of your respective faiths that you would want others to understand? Let's make it a bit more simple. What are some things that are misunderstood that you think we can improve upon? So for me personally, I certainly do not hold this belief, but people that I've met have mentioned that Muslims or have always lived in fear of God, which, as being someone that's incredibly ill-informed, how would you respond to something like that?
Yeah, so that comes from an Arabic word which is actually called khashya. So in some translations of the Quran, they translate it as fear. There's another word called for fear, and that's khawf. So khashya is a fear that is inspired with awe. Usually I give the example, if it's been announced that Taronga Zoo has been broken into, all the lions and tigers have been let loose, Canterbury Bankstown, watch out, Restwell Street, there's a loose lion. Everyone's going to be scared. Lock up your doors, close your windows, make sure you don't go out to the streets. Why? Because you've got fear. You're fearing creation. For a Muslim, the fear of God doesn't mean you distance yourself from God. The fear of God means you approach God. You come to know God. You come to love God. So the analogy I usually give is, as a child growing up, I would fear my father. Not because when I looked at him, I'd be so scared that I don't want to be near him, but I always fear upsetting him. I fear my mother, not because I hate her, not because she's mean, not because she's scary, but I actually fear doing something that causes a tear to flow down. She's upset with me. I want her to be happy with me. I want her to love me. I want her to be proud of me. That's the fear that we're talking about. So when we take that fear to God, it's a totally different level. Because coming back, you were talking about, Trevor, the earth and the dirt and the dust and the sand. As Muslims, if we don't have water to wash ourselves, commit ablution before prayer, then we're permitted to use dry dust, sand. And we wipe our face and we wipe our arms and we enter into prayer. So there's a spiritual connection with both water and the earth for us to be able to have the key to enter into that prayer, that deep connection.
Those rituals really remind you of your connectedness, that you're going to return to the earth and that you're part of it, and so on. If we're talking about misconceptions and...
What's something about Christianity that people misunderstand a lot?
Look, Ahmed just talked about fear. One of the things, fear the Lord, fear in the Bible is actually respect. It's not about being afraid of God. But when they said the fear of the Lord, or even when the people say God forbid or whatever it is, these kind of words are all out there, and they just give this image of God, to be afraid of God. But it's more about respect and love, and like Jesus always talks about Abba, Father, in a much more intimate kind of way of understanding God, not to be feared. And I think lots of this stuff is about God isn't to be feared. They all talk about falling into the hands of a jealous and wrathful, American evangelicalism is really, it's all about fear. It's horrible. But I think there's a beautiful side, and I just think it's a bit that we're misrepresenting because we want to control people or something, or their behavior, rather than I really think people are afraid of that God's too good to be true or something. But if they really, if you when you have an experience of God, it's not about being afraid. When you sense that presence, it's about, people talk about love filling them and peace and everything. It's that sense, or people near death experiences, they're never bad and terrible. They're always this sort of sense of being at peace. And so I think that's one of the things. But as I said, I think because we want to use fear to control, and behavior is that's why we rave on about sin all the time and judgment, and you're going to, it's all about when you get to God, get to heaven, what are you going to say? This kind of stuff, rather than knowing and experiencing God as love. And I think that's one of the sad things. But it is sad that we're not motivated by love, we're motivated by fear. If we're motivated by love, the world could be different. I think I said another thing that I think people think it's about being good, but I don't think it's being really about being a good or a goody two shoes or whatever. As we've been talking about, it's like it's not about you just being seen as a good person or being good. It's about you're giving to other people and you're concerned for them. You're not worried about being good. You're worried about your neighbor or other people. So then you're coming across as being good, but your motivation isn't to be.
It's not for them.
Yeah, it's not for that. But you like when you're doing that, you are good because you're wanting the best for everybody else.
I think so, yeah.
So for us, it comes back to intention as well. So we've got a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, indeed, actions are by intention, and every person will be rewarded according to the intention that they had. So a husband that feeds his wife, it's considered an act of charity, not in the sense that she's in need, but it's an act of love of God, that you're actually providing benefit to someone who is close to you.
Just in what you're saying there, like in the end of, it's not about you're not doing this so that you'll be seen good in the eyes of God. You're doing this because you believe God is good, and that goodness is kind of flowing through you. It's more like osmosis or whatever it is. Like it's
carrying out God's will.
Yeah. So it's not like a burden. It's because you have this sense of God being loving and kind and loving you so much and loving the world so much that it's more flowing. So you're not doing it to be good or to be seen good. Like how often do you hear people saying, "Oh, we've got to be seen to be doing the right thing." Like you're never being seen to do the right thing. You want to be doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and you can't choose any other way.
I think so. A lot of what I've seen in others sometimes is that often the people might call to God in times of need, so during a difficult time in their life. But then what I see is that when they are past that stage and they've sort of almost depended on God for those reasons, when the going is good, then all of a sudden they revert back to what led to the downfall in the first place. So in the end of the day, the intention is the most important part, because if you're only serving for other people to be seen as good, then you're not actually doing good. You're doing it for a self-fulfilling purpose and not carrying out what was intended by God, if that's the right way to phrase it.
Yeah, there's the third last chapter in the Quran, one of the smallest, only three lines. It's actually called the chapter of sincerity, and all it talks about is God, which is quite interesting, because the core part of sincerity is to do things for God. And I'm reminded of the story of one man who donated to build a house of worship, a mosque in a nearby city, and he got someone to build the mosque on his behalf in order for people to worship. But there was only a few people that knew that he was actually the donor and the contributor for the mosque funds. When he came to visit, people told him that the entire village now know that this mosque is the mosque of so-and-so, who was your agent just working on your behalf. You're the actual real donor of the mosque, but they're not attributing the mosque to you. They said to him, now that you're here, you're visiting the city, how about we use this as a time in which we announce to the entire village that you're the one that actually donated for the mosque. So he asked them a question. He says, who did I build the mosque for? They said, you built it for God. So he says to them, does God know that I built the mosque for him? They said, yes, of course he does. He's all knowing and he's all hearing. He says, so why do I have to tell people that I'm the one that was responsible for building the mosque? But that's something that we don't get. You know, if we donate $1, we want to publicize it on the billboards on the M5. You know, I've done something great and profound, but that's not the reason, like Trevor's saying, that we do things. We don't do things so people can notice that I've done good, but I do good because it's good, and God wants me to do good.
I know lots of people in Canterbury Bankstown Council who do amazing good, but they never want to be put forward to be Citizen of the Year or whatever, because it's not about that. It's about, and some of them are actually people who are, they call themselves post-Christian, or because they got tired of the Christian stuff, but they're out there just doing good because, and they have this freedom, and they don't want to be recognized, but they do it. And there's millions of people like that, I think, that we probably all know, and they have no need to be recognized or want to be. They're being, I think. And I think religion is more about, it's about doing, but it's also about being. One flows out of the other, I think.
Trevor, how do you think your faith encourages followers to engage with people of other religions in a respectful way?
When I lived in Ireland, it's really funny, in Ireland they used to talk about other religions. It was like Catholic and Protestant were other religions. They didn't see themselves as Christians. And there used to be a joke that if you were in Belfast, they'd ask you, you're Protestant or you're Catholic, and it depends on which answer you gave and who you gave it to, you might get killed. But it was people not understanding each other. I was very involved in this sort of reconciliation movement. And I think then that's always been part of who I am, and that stuff with interfaith stuff is, I love it on a personal level of knowing people, and not just in a kind of two religions talking to each other. It's in people talking, and we got so much in common. And actually, the more I talk about Islam, the more I read a book on Islam once, and it was unbelievable. But the more I read about it, the more I realized how great Jesus was. It wasn't that it was any less or greater, but it actually brought out the good stuff in mine by talking to others, and perhaps that's what's going on, today as well. But that's where it started, with the stupidity of people and being divided, and you just think they're just so thinking in this little narrow way, but then you realize they've been used like pawns by the colonial British to control land and power and everything, and then they've set this up, and on it goes, and on and on and on, and so for me, then I've just taken it, I guess, to it's a way of breaking down barriers, and food and gathering like that is so important for all groups. And when you meet and you just share food with people and drink, it's an easy way to break down and talk, and you realize these things just disappear. But I think they're like constructs to divide. But I don't think it's religion itself is doing. But sometimes they are doing it within that to divide and to control. But I don't think it's the way of Jesus or the way of Muhammad, peace be upon him, or any religion.
Yeah. In terms of that interaction, Muslims have been coming to Australia. In fact, Arnhem Land in Northern Australia for centuries, even before Captain Cook, and Australian historians have actually documented that, and they've done studies and radioactive tests and so on some of the drawings and artifacts, and so Muslims would actually come from the island of Makassar, at least 500 to 600 years ago, and not only did they recognize the authority of First Nations people in modern-day Australia, but they actually intermarried with them, and some of them actually went with their new families back to Makassar. They had children, and there's actually children and other generations that are actually there that have been reunited. And so that's actually something that's been part and parcel of our tradition. And we find the land, and there are people there. That's theirs. We don't have any ill intent, but we trade and we recognize and we establish relationships. There's a verse in the Quran where God says, "Let there be no compulsion in religion." Some people say, Islam was spread by the sword. So where'd you get that from? There's a verse in the Quran where it says, "Let there be no compulsion in religion." You can't force anyone, because it's about conviction. if a person's not convinced, then it doesn't really matter what they say that they are believing. It's got to be in the heart. So we can never force any belief on anyone. And there's a beautiful saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He says, none of you truly believe until you love for your brother. He uses the masculine, but it's equally applied in Arabic language to the feminine. Until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. One great scholar, Imam Nawawi, who's considered a heavyweight in Islamic scholarship, says, the meaning of love for your brother is your brother in humanity. And that's so special because it's no longer about those who are similar to me and aligned to me in religious belief, but it's the same flesh and it's the same blood. Again, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, encourages Muslims to establish relationships with neighbors, and it doesn't matter who the neighbors are. He says, none of you truly believe in God in the last day. This is an article of faith for us. So he denies true belief in those articles of faith. He says, none of you truly believe in God in the last day, the one who does not show generosity to their neighbor. And so we don't ask, are you Muslim? If you're not Muslim, I'm not going to be kind to you. No. In fact, you're obligated as a Muslim, whether they're Christian or Jew or Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, it doesn't really matter. If you're cooking food, in our tradition, if you're cooking food in a pot, like a soup or a stew, and your neighbor has actually smelt the scent of that soup, you are required to add water. If you say, but it's not enough for us and for them. Prophet says, add water and it will increase, and give to your neighbor because they've smelt it. How dare you cook for yourself, but you don't know the situation financially. Maybe they can't afford, or they smelt it so beautiful and the children are there. I wish we had something like this. Even if you come in with gifts for your children home and your neighbor's children see them, then you have a duty as well to share with your neighbor. Otherwise, don't go and expose it. So this idea of interconnectedness in the community is so core to Islamic belief. But Muslims, Christians and Jews have coexisted for so long. Jerusalem, I've been to Jerusalem multiple times. Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, once you walk into the old walls, is divided into 4 quarters: the Armenian quarters, the Christian quarters, the Jewish quarters, and the Muslim quarters. I went to the Church of the Resurrection, the Holy Sepulchre. I visited there, and there were Christians there. It's a noble place, and it's a special place within Christianity. I went to Bethlehem. In our tradition, Prophet Muhammad says that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. In fact, on his night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, he was taken by the angel Gabriel on a heavenly beast, and he stops by a place, and he's ordered to pray there 2 cycles of prayer. Prophet Muhammad asks the angel Gabriel, what's this place? He says, this is Bethlehem, the place where Jesus was buried. And he passes by another place and he says, I saw Moses alive in his grave praying. So he connected with these past prophets and messengers. And we also believe that he had a inter-prophetic messengership conference on that particular night of his night journey in the Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, where God gathered all of the prophets and they actually had prayer together. They discussed with one another that particular night before he was taken on a heavenly journey, where he actually received the divine gift of 5 daily prayers. It was actually 50 to start with. But he comes back to the 6th heaven. Moses asked the Prophet Muhammad, what did your Lord tell you? He said, he ordered me to pray 50 times, me and my community. Moses says, I tried people before you. They won't be able to do it. Go back, ask your Lord to make it lighter. So he goes back. God says, make it 45. He goes back to Moses. Moses says, no, it's still too much. So he goes back and forth 9 times until it's 5. But God says those 5, they'll be rewarded as 50. So we're actually indebted to Moses. Because if it wasn't for Moses, every half an hour we'd be going in and out praying. We wouldn't be able to do anything else.
And how do you see your role as religious leaders in promoting social cohesion? And how can we apply this in our neighbourhood in Canterbury, Bankstown? Trevor?
I feel, not a responsibility, but I feel like I have to model stuff that's very challenging through myself. But I think all that I'm doing in my congregation is trying to, because it's really hard even between like religions, but in Christianity, when you've got different groups and such varieties of theologies, they're all so divided up to even get them to cross the boundaries within that. Like for me, sometimes I find it easier to go to work in an interfaith way than I do in a Christian way, because as soon as I open my mouth, they go, Uniting Church, oh, you're just this liberal, blah, progressive, gay loving, whatever, they'll go on like that rather than trying to understand like why I'm like this. But when I'm talking to someone, that doesn't come across. You don't have that. You have this more trying to understand each other, and there's a bit of wonder, I think. But I try to model it in my congregation, because often people are territorial, and this is our church, it's not their church, and you're trying to get people to share things with each other and share all the good, it's not our church, it's God's church. It's not our world, it's God's world. It's like seeing it like this rather than I just see how people are kind of squashed into this way of thinking that has nothing to do with Christianity, but has more to do with, as I've said about 1,000 times, power and control and parochialism, or whatever it's called, and this kind of way that we react, like I was going to say, like dogs in a pack, rather than an openness to others. So within my congregations, I've got to do it, and hopefully if they do that, then they can. But like last week, I had a lovely situation at our drop-in where there was this woman who hardly spoke a word of English, was Chinese, and she came in and helped two of our Tongan women who prefer perhaps talking Tongan. But this is wonderful seeing them working together beyond language and so on. And so I think it's like, I get really excited when I see my people doing that. I really get really excited then when the same woman talks about her Muslim neighbors who were enjoying the music her son was playing, which was actually not from his culture, but from their whatever, somewhere from the Middle East. And I'm going, I love hearing these little conversations about people existing and learning, and because I think it's really, it's one of the lovely things about living here, because you get to appreciate so many different things if you're willing to kind of push out all the prejudice. But I think you can learn to do that. So like for me, that stuff about prejudice and not showing, you have to model it, and you have to keep on forgiving, and hopefully one day they'll get it and practice it with their neighbours and others.
I actually just had a recent experience in terms of multiple faiths. So there was one couple that I married off, and the bride came from a Christian family. She'd become Muslim, but her parents and her grandparents are Christian. So her grandmother is actually terminally ill. And she'd been speaking with her grandmother, we know such and such Imam, he married us off, do you mind if he came to visit? And initially she was like, no, I'm not accepting any visit from any Imam. So they spoke with her, he was just going to come and visit and say nice words and stuff. So finally she accepted. So I went to the hospital. This was at Liverpool Hospital. And she had her neighbour, this lady who was terminally ill, Christian. I think she was probably 80 plus. She had her neighbour with her, sitting by her side. And we just spoke. We just spoke about life. We spoke about the meaning of life. We spoke about the purpose of life. And it was like I was actually sitting with my grandmother, because it was very, very similar concepts. And by the end of the visit, she actually said, "Thank you so much for coming." And then the granddaughter actually asked, "Can I pass your number on to my mother so she can organise another visit, because they really, really enjoyed the time that you spent with them." I did that because my religion calls me, because God calls me to do that. If there's someone that's in need, that needs that comfort, then I don't say, oh, they're Jewish or they're Christian, I'm not going to visit them. I mean, I also do a lot of chaplaincy work, and that's part of what it is to be a chaplain. It's to be there to spiritually care for people, to pastorally care for people, to hold their hand and to walk together. I mean, someone that's in grief, someone that's terminally ill, someone that's had a member of their family that they're very, very close to, that they've lost. How do you help that person? How do you guide help that person to guide themselves? How do you support that person? That's part of faith. That's part of cohesion in society. See, sometimes I get a bit agitated when people talk about social cohesion. Let's just sing together and clap our hands together and we're all the same. Well, yeah, we are sort of similar, but we've got a lot of differences as well.
Yeah.
So, that's why sometimes in interfaith gatherings, I say, interfaith is not just about what's common between us, but there are also significant differences, which I think we've spoken about very, very clearly, but it's about being genuine. That we're not shy to speak about our differences and our different worldviews and our outlooks on life, but to respect each other for that. And I think that's where we can get to a functional, productive society. Despite our differences, we'd actually put hand in hand and say, I respect that difference, even though I fundamentally disagree with your approach or with your theology. I respect you because you're my brother, you're my sister in humanity.
I'm going to ask the question. Do you think that's like a place that it's not trans religion? I'm trying to think like a space that's kind of beyond, like that you're describing. It's like your religion matters, but you're like where you're getting to is beyond your religion or beyond. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Being Christian or Jewish or Muslim matters, but you're actually finding a space where it's like looking after the human, the person. It's I'm trying to articulate this, but I it's like for me in interfaith stuff, I think it's not about becoming one religion.
No,
It's realizing these are all different, but there is this space where we're going to, or what's really important. And like for me, it's not just about when we talk about beliefs aren't just I believe like Jesus died and rose again and blah blah blah. It's like it's believing in love, and this is sort of like yeah. So it's not about beliefs, but it's about practice and life and living. That's where it leads to.
yeah. For that, I mean, on one level, I would completely agree with you. On another, I come back to the notion that for me, Islam is a way of life.
Mm.
So for me, it's actually my belief that guides my mundane, daily routine interactions. So even the way that I walk into the bathroom or leave the bathroom, even the way that I dress my clothes, I actually take guidance from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So he would put his right sleeve first, so I put my right sleeve first. He'd put his right sandal on first, right sock on first, I do the same. When he takes his clothing off, then it would be the opposite. When you walk into the bathroom, left foot first. Walk into the mosque or your home, right foot first. When you greet someone, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Before prayer or before ablution, then you brush your teeth with a traditional toothstick. So simple acts in life, for me, are always going to be back to religion. So I guess for me, on a personal level, I don't have that distinction between worldly life and religious life. For me, it's like a complete life. There might be some Muslims that actually make that distinction. Okay, let's separate it. But I think on the whole, when we read the text and the tradition, Islam is there to guide the Muslim basically with every single breath that they're taking, such that it's always in the remembrance of God. Even though you don't invoke God verbally, He's always present in your heart, I guess, in that sense.
Maybe this is a bit of a Christian thing. Like Buddhism always is described as a way of life. And I think Christianity should be a way of life as well. But somehow in Christianity, beliefs sometimes trump practice and being, unfortunately. But I think they can get it, or we prioritize them. So do you believe the right thing? We accept you. Muslims, they don't believe the right thing, therefore we don't. But when you go, they are important, but there's some place beyond that is more important, where maybe it's our experience of God is. So I agree that but I think this is one of the failings in Christianity, is that we don't see it as a way of life. And too often it's just on believing the right thing rather than how it actually influences how you live, and being humble and kind and so on. So like, I mean, there's a bit of rhetoric around the world now, and in a certain other country, and you just think all these things we've been talking about, like things like empathy and compassion, they're really, really what it's all about, but they're kind of being dismissed, and the sort of beliefs are held up higher than these things, which are the things that connect people, and where everybody's treated equally. And like we're seeing like I think we live on this planet where we've caused, like, the greatest sin is what we've done to the environment, and that we continue to do, and is now affecting everything, and is creating wars, and there's going to be more and more refugees and people moving. And so where we've got countries that are closing up borders, we're like, here's another stage in our sinfulness, because we're not seeing ourselves as being connected to all the people, and that every single person in the world has a right to the same as us. And so it's this kind of circle thing, but it's connected to the earth and to each other. So I just see these things happening in the world, and they just seem to be so far from what we're talking about today.
Yeah, on that misallocation or misuse of resources. So for us, water is significant for us to perform our act of worship. That's the prayer and the ablution. Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, says, even if you are at the side of a river, then be careful with the amount of water that you use. But you've got a whole river that's there. So the intent there is to be mindful, because that river's not always going to be there. There are going to be times where water is going to be scarce. So just because you've got a lot doesn't mean you are extravagant and you waste that resource.
Well, that's like so much First Nation stuff, isn't it? Like, there's like if we were out there, we go 10 kangaroos, we shoot 10 of them, put 9 in the freezer. But there'd be none left for reproducing or doing anything. The thing of just taking one and leave, that's much more about caring for the earth and caring for the water, or just taking that thing. But so that's where you can find commonalities, I think, between Indigenous life and living and understanding and wisdom within religion and in other ones. And I think it's very important for us who are not First Nations people to find some of those things and to bring them out, not so that because it's there, but they're being kind of hidden. They're being kind of pushed away, that wisdom from way, 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 way back.
That reminds me, actually, 2 things. Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, says in a statement, wisdom is the lost property of a believer. So wherever you find it, take it. So because we see God as all-wise, that's one of his 99 names that we believe in our tradition. But he also reminds us that if the last hour were to come, meaning the world were going to end, and in your hand was a sapling, continue to plant it. You might ask, but the world's ending. Who's going to benefit from that plant? There's not going to be anyone around. Well, it's not about the action. It's about the intention. Why did I do it?
And for who? Yeah. We might wind this up. And I'd like to say some last words, and maybe each of you and James can say some last words. But I wanted to really thank you for your time today. We've taken up a lot of your time, but I think it's been a really interesting and fruitful discussion. And I want to thank you also for highlighting, the connection, the importance of connection with one another and with all living things, and the importance of values, and also in particular for me, our shared humanity that has come up time and time again, and also for the insights into your own religions and what's been important to you. Trevor, over to you.
In this discussion?
Well, final words for the podcast. how you'd like to
I feel like
wrap things up.
I can't believe we've been here for 2 hours and 12 minutes. And I think that's about 3 or 4 podcasts or more. So I wouldn't put it out as a 2 hour, 12 minute one. I don't know. I've just really enjoyed the conversation with stuff. And I don't want to say, yeah, we all agree, it's all lovely, love, because actually in the differences, it's great stuff that we can learn. And I think that's one of the things. It's like having conversations, but being able to see difference and respect difference and just get on with it is not about becoming one. It's like becoming more, like accepting diversity and quite enjoying it, that people are different or that people believe different things and have a different views of God. And I think that's already very good and it's more helpful. We don't want to just dumb it down, because the more we talk, we could be talking forever. And then after a while we go, oh yeah, but this, but you don't have to be, it's great that you don't have to be like in a kind of a which one is best or which is right and which is wrong. It's this kind of exploration which I really like. And I would like hope that as we're talking here like this, that people who might hear this or people who are in the community would just start talking to other people. Like I love when I talk to people. I love when Muslim women come and talk to me. I get the greatest kick because I don't expect them to. And when they start talking, I go, wow, I'm surprised. But they do what I do to other people, and I'm thinking, this is really nice. Or they thank me, they say, oh, why are you giving us food? And I'm going, because it's about like sharing what we have. It's not about giving it to certain people. It's like with everybody. And I just love it that you're connecting in a human way. Because I have this kind of politeness, I think, no, I better not. But when they speak to me, I just find it really, it's lovely. It's like doing it back to me. And I really get such a lovely feeling of, wow. Because I feel like I'm accepted. It's not me doing the accepting to people. I find them accepting me. And I find that really nice too, to have that coming back at me. So I can keep on talking, waffling around. And he might pull it together.
It reminds me of my daughter, probably around 6 years old at that time. We're actually at one of the local parks, and I was just pushing her on the swing, as dads do. But then there was another girl from another family, and she was sort of playing near the swing. I was wearing a gown similar to this, which is, it's a long traditional Muslim gown. And she just looks up at me, and she says the most interesting question. Her parents are actually watching. I think they're probably thinking, what is she going to say? She said, excuse me, why are you wearing a dress? So I said to her, it's just a long shirt. She said, oh, okay. Yeah. And she was happy. If we could all be like that girl, if we see something that's a bit different, we don't understand, don't be shy, don't fear, don't be scared to ask. Ask. And there's an answer. Yeah. And it opens up conversation. And we just move on.
Mm. Thank you, Ahmed.
Yeah, very good.
I think it's been it's an absolute privilege just to sit down with the two of you, because I've had the opportunity to sit down with Christians. I've had the opportunity to sit down with Muslims. But when we talk about all the different things here today, is about not just, what do we do that's similar and connect on that basis, but it's also acceptance of the things that are different about us. And I think that really brings out our humanity. But that's a very beautiful, beautiful story. And I certainly hope that viewers that watch this are approaching it with an inquisitiveness, or being inquisitive about these types of things. But all of us here at Voices of CBCity, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
To check out more episodes of Voices of CBCity, more information, or our disclaimers, check out our website, cb.city/Voices of CBCity. The Voices of CBCity podcast is hosted by James Brown and Anna Sotoma, produced by Renee Trainer, and edited by the City of Canterbury Bankstown. This project is funded by the New South Wales Government through the New South Wales Social Cohesion Grants for Local Government and led by the City of Canterbury Bankstown. To finish off Voices of CBCity today, we'll be featuring a different kind of voice of CBCity, poets from the Bankstown Poetry Slam. Bankstown Poetry Slam is an award-winning community platform which empowers people to express themselves through spoken word poetry. Monthly poetry slams usually take place on the last Tuesday of every month at Bankstown Arts Centre. A lot of the poems highlight social cohesion and a sense of belonging. You can check out some of the amazing talent at Bankstown Poetry Slam's YouTube channel, but for today, we hope you enjoy Where I'm From by Layla Mkh.
They ask me where I'm from, and I struggle to tell them that I am cedar on eucalyptus lands, that I am from the land that will one day consume our bodies 6 feet under, that I am from the land that today consumes me because it makes me wish that I was 6 feet under, that I am transplanted heart in rejecting body, that I wish you knew that I am somebody, that I am a rose in the barrel of an AK-47, and I am inspired because I am only ever exotically desired and only ever really required to fill a quota. They ask me where I'm from, and I tell them that I am fully sick. What they don't know is that I am also fully sick and tired of people seeing this hijab, this melanin, this name. I tell them where I'm from, but all I get in response is hipsters trying to claim my tabbouleh, my hummus, my falafel. You will gladly swallow up my culture, but spit me out because I make you uncomfortable. Because I am just as Australian as you are and just as immigrant as you are, but you are still uncertain of where I'm from. They ask me where I'm from, and I tell them that my first breath of air was in a hospital room on Earlwood Road in Bankstown, that my foundations are snow-capped Lebanese mountains, but the rest of me is only just perishable blue. I tell them that my first breath of air should have been Mediterranean sea, sand and stars, but you pillaged my lands and let politicians conflate our flee from your terror with terrorism. So now I can only see the stars from afar. They tell me it's cloudy because I live in the city. I tell them that I can't see the stars from here because you close my curtains every night. I guess it's really just because I'm not. They ask me where I'm from, and I tell them that I am blessed to live on Darug land, belonging to the Eora nation, still not forgotten for thousands of generations, that I am not a new generation of Australian, that my grandfather carried this country on his back, that my grandmother gave this country her backbone, but you're still convinced that I am not from the country that you claim to own. But I know that the next time someone asks me where I'm from, I'll struggle to tell them, because it's hard for me to comprehend that this land makes me feel so alone, but I somehow still call Australia home.